In the High Court at Auckland, on the 9th of December 2024, Greg Olliver was given until the 31st of January 2025 to come up with a creditor's proposal to avoid bankruptcy. It was reported that he owes 1543 Capital from the USA some $53 million, the Bank of New Zealand around $2 million, and with numerous other creditors, the total is around $60 million. It has now been almost 3.5 years since Mr. Olliver became the owner of Gulf Harbour Country Club. He made repeated assurances to club members, community residents and other parties who were concerned that he might have plans to convert the green space to residential housing, that he intended to build on what was already there and make the Gulf Harbour Country Club an even brighter jewel in the crown of Auckland and New Zealand. It is believed that within one day of becoming owner for the country club land, it was packaged and offered for sale to people who might have an interest in building houses on the green spaces of the country club. All while ongoing assurances were being made to the local community and members. Over 50 trees were cut down and further assurances were given that they would be replaced with New Zealand native trees. Those assurances were so compelling that it came as a complete shock to most of the community when 2 years later, the country club was abruptly closed. Members turned up for their tea time on that day in July 2023 to an A4 sheet of paper taped to the inside of the pro shop that simply stated that the club was now closed. A contact name was given, but no communication was responded to from either that person or the owner. 4 months later, the truth of the owner's intents were laid bare, as a resource consent was lodged with Auckland Council, which failed to hide a thinly veiled plan to convert 8 of the holes of the existing country club to residential property. The plans of what would happen to the rest of the country club were presented as a redevelopment of the golf course through the purchase of other land, such that the first 8 holes would be converted into residential housing land and the new land used to replace those holes so that an 18-hole golf course could be maintained. This never made any economic sense, and it is believed that this may simply have been a ploy to get council consent to vary the zoning and the associated 999-year encumbrance. As expected, no deal to purchase this other land was ever completed. And it became obvious that the rest of the green space, the remaining 10 holes, would likely follow the same pathway over time, and KWGS believe plans have been cited that show up to 3,000 homes were envisaged to make up a development of residential property that would more than double the number of residents in Gulf Harbour. Of course, the cost to the Whangaparoa Peninsula community of this plan succeeding were, and are, immeasurable. The roading infrastructure barely copes with current traffic levels. The addition of thousands more cars in and out of Gulf Harbour create a hardly imaginable scenario. Just that alone would dramatically change the day-to-day lives of the people who have committed their life to this small part of New Zealand at the end of a peninsula. Furthermore, anyone who takes more than a few minutes to think about the knock-on effects on education services, health services, wastewater capacity, recreation, and even food supply would quickly come to the conclusion that the consequence of this development would not be contained to Gulf Harbour and Army Bay. The whole of the peninsula would become a services-starved, gridlocked nightmare every single day. The Keep Whangaparoa's Green Spaces group were, however, not caught by surprise. KWGS, formed at the time Mr. Olliver purchased the golf course and country club business by a small group of people who did not believe that a property developer would suddenly decide to become a long-term golf club business owner, began to mobilise and plan for the eventuality of closure that suddenly appeared on that piece of paper on the pro shop door in July 2023. In November 2023, Mr. Olliver asked Auckland Council to alter the boundaries of the golf course land, effectively cutting the front holes from the back ones. The consent was at first considered by Council using their usual processes and was then passed on to an independent commissioner. And the commissioner adjudged that a public notification, submissions and hearing process should be put in place, as the boundary change request was far-reaching in terms of what could logically follow for the golf course land, and therefore the public should be able to have a say before any decision was made. The owner has asked since for a judicial review of the Commissioner's decision, but that review is yet to be scheduled. KWGS legal advice is that it is extremely unlikely that the High Court would reverse the Commissioner's decision. The inconvenient reality, and one that has proved resilient to the change of use of the land to assuage the appetite of the property developer and owner, is a covenant that was placed on the land in 2006. Some unidentified parties, which may well have been orchestrated by Olliver's associates, claim that the council has a responsibility to open up more land for housing development and that the covenant or encumbrance was not created to protect the land for golfers. The reality is that the encumbrance was designed to protect the green environment, health, well-being and investment of all of the people who bought homes in the Gulf Harbour area from 1998. The Rodney District Council granted developers of homes at the end of the peninsula and, especially those that border the golf course, the right to build houses on exceptionally small sections, based on a commitment that the green space would be committed in perpetuity, 999 years. This was actually an agreement that was made so that developers could build smaller and more affordable homes. And the covenant was framed on that basis, and its commitment was to open space and for recreational use as a golf course. The encumbrance has been at the centre of the owner's plans, and the initial attempt to obtain that first resource consent was part of the strategy to undermine that covenant. KWGS has been very closely engaged with both the council and the community to ensure that the encumbrance is upheld. Again, contrary to some unidentified parties, its members are not all golfers, and even the ones that are golfers are focused on maintenance of the green spaces that form such an important feature of the Gulf Harbour community. KWGS are acting on behalf of the whole community of Gulf Harbour, and by logical extension, Army Bay and the rest of the peninsula. They have done their homework, conducted the transport studies, the wastewater studies, the assessment of the critical role that is played by the green space in stormwater management, sediment management, the carbon features, and the very important role that the land plays in supporting the nature corridor from Tiri Tiri Matangi Island across the Shakespeare Regional Park and then the Country Club, right down the Whangaparoa Peninsula through to the main North Island landmass at Silverdale. As an example, the infrastructure study commissioned by KWGS, and that will soon be presented, shows that in addition to the wastewater and roading constraints, plus the existing vacant land already zoned for residential development, that east of Whangaparoa town, with existing zoned land and the growth in housing from intensification allowed under central government legislation, the potential already exists to meet housing demand for close to 100 years. The report also highlights the fact that east of Whangaparoa town is severely geographically constrained and is therefore not part of Council's focus for future urban development. In addition to these hurdles for any would-be developer, KWGS has pointed out on this YouTube channel that the road from Whangaparoa town centre to Gulf Harbour is highly congested at peak times. And as the population continues to grow with some 1,400 more dwellings already zoned and allowed for in Gulf Harbour steadily coming on stream, the peak congestion times will continue to increase. There is no scope to economically widen the 10-kilometre stretch of road from Whangaparoa town to Gulf Harbour. And this constraint on development will not in any way be alleviated by the Pen Link Road, scheduled for completion in 2028. In July 2024, after extensive lobbying by KWGS and other locals, and after two disastrous fires which destroyed the clubhouse buildings, Auckland Council CEO Phil Wilson wrote to Mr Olliver, stating that the council would uphold the encumbrance in favour of the community, who wish to see the land remain zoned as open space for golf and country club purposes. More recently, in November last year, Watercare dropped a bombshell on any would-be property developers on the Whangaparoa Peninsula, declaring there will be no new wastewater connections until at least 2031, due to capacity constraints at the Army Bay wastewater treatment plant. So, what are our hopes for the future of the Gulf Harbour Country Club land? Well, KWGS has been working since early last year to assess, evaluate and define the potential for the land and developing its vision, all within the envelope of the encumbrance. First of all, we realised that the current owner had no intention to fulfil their obligations as landowner to manage the green space. Its fairways, weeds, paths, pest plants or rodents that were beginning to become more visible as long grass was now hiding the fairways and offering new places where they could safely live. The eventual reduction of the buildings that had become such a familiar landmark to the community being reduced to rubble by an uncaring owner failing to secure the vacant property demonstrated to everyone that the only way that the green space would be looked after involved proactive action from the community. Those familiar with the area will have noticed in recent months the golf course has lost its derelict appearance and is looking a lot more like a tidy green space that its community can once again feel proud to conduct their lives in and around. In October last year, KWGS supported the founding of the Gulf Harbour Community Trust, who have created an organisation that now is working to a plan to take care of the country club land given the current owner's ongoing neglect of it. The Community Trust is now supported by a team of people who are methodically mowing the 89 hectares of land and a team of landscaping experts and enthusiasts who are tackling the sprawling vegetation that has grown untended for over a year. The Trust has also partnered with Restore Hibiscus and Bays and educated and enabled teams of people to begin a meaningful fight back against the pest plants and weeds that have seeded all over the golf course and now into people's gardens. New Zealand Forest and Bird have also continued to play a critical role in managing rodents and using their bait stations and traps that are in situ all over the course and managed by volunteers. Over 130 people from the local community have consistently committed their time, energy and resource on volunteer days, and more than 30 people have volunteered to be patrons of the fairways and take additional responsibility to pick up rubbish and manage the pest plants, weeds and areas around specific parts of the country club. As with the KWGS executive team, most of those volunteers are not golfers either, but they are committed to seeing the unique Robert Trent Jones Jr. golf course take its place in the green space that they intend to daily enjoy for many more years to come. KWGS believes the timing is right for the significant area around the former clubhouse to be developed. One potential addition would be a resort hotel. This is allowed for under the terms of the encumbrance. KWGS have researched and now articulated a possible business model revolving around such a resort hotel with restaurants and day spa, with a high-tech golf driving range and, of course, the golf course itself, fully restored, being a major drawcard for local residents, Aucklanders and visitors to the city. KWGS has carried out a comprehensive financial analysis which suggests that such a venture could be very attractive to the right investors. Importantly, KWGS say that any property developer thinking they can pick up some cheap land and build houses across it needs to think again. Mr. Olliver's ill-conceived plans have very sadly destroyed the community asset and wreaked environmental vandalism across this beautiful piece of land. But this community has taken a stand and fought back strongly. We are all in for the long haul, and anyone thinking the land is right for housing development should rethink and move on to other opportunities where the context and infrastructure can support such aspirations. Gulf Harbour has grown substantially more than any other community on the peninsula, and it is located at the very end of it. It is wholly unsuited for any further dramatic residential development, which might in the short term line the pockets of a property developer, but will leave a critically damaged community of people in its wake for generations to come. A community that, by the way, already has provision for 100 years of housing capacity to take its share in the growth of Auckland without any further intrusion onto the green spaces of the peninsula. That is why we are fighting. That is why this community will not back down. Ultimately, something which at times has seemed destined to severely compromise and possibly destroy this community on the peninsula now looks set to create an even brighter and better jewel in Auckland's crown.